Okay, guys, so today we're going to be talking about the functional communication profile revised, also known as the FCPR. Um, so for starting, the author is Larry L. Kleiman, with the publisher being the Lingui Systems, and the publication year being 2003. The qualification level is at a B, with the cost of $88, including the examiner's manual and 15 profile forms. Um, and then we'll talk more about the general overview of the test. So the type of test, it's a criterion referenced, not a norm referenced, and uses a rating scale. It's a functional slash observational assessment, with the type of scoring being functional inventory, so no standard scores. The purpose of this assessment evaluates mastery of specific functional communication behaviors for instructional planning, and with the focus of being strengths in real world functional communication skills. And the test response is observation, open ended verbal responses, information reports, and functional tasks. And what I mean by information reports, that could be anything from a teacher or a caregiver or a parent, just more information regarding the child's behaviors that are not observed. That will be an example of an information report. And then for age ranges, it could be anywhere from 3 years old to an adult. And they didn't really specify what means as an adult, so we're just assuming any age of an adult for now. And it covers domains such as sensory motor, attentiveness, receptive and expressive language, pragmatic slash social language, speech, voice, and oral fluency, with non-oral communication. So basically, everything you could think of, it's covered in here. So we're gonna talk about each one individually, and then also the time required to administer. So it ranges from 45 minutes to 90 minutes, as they say, but honestly, it could range even more because this is an observation assessment. So there's really no set time of when you need to complete it in terms of like each test or each domain. So you could really separate it into parts if you don't get like the full like observation in that one setting. And then access to training materials, it's provided in the manual, but no formal training is required. But like I said, professional knowledge is recommended, which matches the qualification level of B. And then yeah, so let me talk more about the the nature of the content, and then specifically each domain. So obviously the functional communication behaviors across oral and non-oral modalities is what we're going to cover right now. So for example, sensory and motor, the focus is looking to use the sensory and motor skills to aid communication. So essentially we're looking at how vision, hearing, and motor coordination supports or hinders one's communication. So an example could be, can the individual track a speaker visually? Can they physically respond, such as point, gesture? And these are aspects of the checklist. I wish I was able to put it on here, but it didn't let me download it. So I did pull some information from each domain from the checklist that kind of just summarizes overall of what we're observing. So the attentiveness, the focus is the individual's attention and engagement during communication. And we're looking for sustained attention to conversation or task, ability to focus without excessive distraction. And an example could be, does the child maintain eye contact or respond appropriately without constant prompting? And now we have receptive and expressive. So for receptive, the focus will be understanding of spoken or sign language. And we're looking for comprehension of directions, questions, and conversational language. We're also looking for the ability to process and interpret communication from others. An example could be if the individual can follow multi-step instructions. And then we also have the expressive language, with the focus of being the ability to express needs, thoughts, and feelings. So we're looking for if the child or anyone uses words, sentences, or other forms of expression, spoken or nonverbal. So an example could be if the individual is able to ask for help, share ideas, or express emotions verbally or through gestures. And then we have pragmatic social language. So the focus would be social use of communication and context. So we're looking for turn taking, topic maintenance, and appropriate social responses. We're also looking for understanding of social rules such as greetings, politeness. An example would be, does the individual initiate conversation appropriately or respond to humor? So those are some things we're looking for in terms of pragmatics. And then with speech, this is more about clarity and intelligibility of spoken communication. So we're looking for appropriate articulation, pronunciation, voice volume, and fluency. So the example could be, is the speech understandable to unfamiliar listeners? And then we have more in depth of voice and oral fluency. So with voice, the focus would be quality, pitch, loudness, and resonance of the voice. We're looking for whether the voice sounds natural and healthy. So an example would be, does the individual have a hoarse, nasal, or monotone voice that affects communication? And we're taking voice now, so this probably, we understand what some of these what some of these voices could sound like. So it's really helpful for us to have that background knowledge when we're observing. So for oral fluency, the focus would be smoothness and flow of speech. So we're looking for a presence of stuttering, hesitations, or speech interruptions. An example would be, does an individual speak fluently or frequently pause, repeat sounds, or get stuck? And then lastly, we have non-oral communication. So this is basically just looking at alternative forms of communication such as gestures, facial expressions, communication boards, or devices. So an example will be, if a speech is limited, does the individual successfully use signs or AAC devices to communicate their needs? And then with scoring and additional information, what is measured? So we're looking for the strengths and needs in each communication domain, patterns of functioning across different communication contexts with changes over time, which is also useful for progress monitoring. And then the final results would be, instead of a single score, you basically get a profile showing how well the person functions across different communication areas. And this profile would also help guide treatment goals and instructional planning, rather than comparing the individual to like a normative group, which is why I said earlier it's not like a norm reference assessment, which is very important to consider, because we're not comparing to another group or a specific child. We're just comparing to their own progress, which is very important. And then also additional notes I like to add, like I said, there's no standard scores, percentiles, or scale scores that are used. It's meant to guide intervention, but not to diagnose or classify, because it's seemingly like a checklist of things they're able to do versus their limited abilities. So it's just kind of guiding us into what they can and can't do, but we're not using it as a diagnosis compared to other assessments where you're able to diagnose certain things based off the results. And then also, observational consistency between raters is important for reliability. So if another SLP were to give the same observational assessment, that would be really helpful, because you're able to compare what they observed and what they didn't, and that will also enhance the reliability data. So yeah, so thank you for listening.